Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Revenue Throughput Podcast. I'm your host, Jose Palomino, and today's guest is Josh Steimle. And Josh helps consultants, coaches, business owners, and leaders do something that many of you perhaps would like to do, but maybe have been a little bit intimidated about, and that is to write, publish, and market a book. And in the world of marketing, there's nothing as effective as a book. No brochure, no video, no other piece of collateral will match the impact of a well-produced, published book. So listen closely as Josh shares some immediate tidbits, tips, focus areas that you can actually start actualizing to get your book into the marketplace, capturing your expertise in a way that positions you for your best customers. Listen closely as we welcome Josh to the show. Well, welcome, Josh, to the Revenue Throughput Podcast.
Thanks, Jose, for having me on.
Well, Josh, why don't you, just to give context to our listeners, help us just understand what you do and who you do it for.
Sure. Well, right now I run a company called Published Author, and we help entrepreneurs to write nonfiction books, how-to books that they can leverage as a marketing tool to grow their business.
Wow, so these are people who generally who aren't necessarily self-identifying as I am an author, but they identify as I run a business or I provide this service. Is that right?
That's right. In fact, some of the people, they come to us and they say, I want to be an author, but I don't want to be a writer. I don't know how to write. I don't want to learn how to write. And so we help people who are non-writers to become authors, as well as other entrepreneurs who say, I want to write a book and I want to do it myself.
Wow. So in that sense, why should somebody, and who typically would you find this, somebody who says, that makes sense. I think this would help me grow my business, my world, my kingdom, so to speak.
Well, the entrepreneurs who come to us, they already have this idea that I should write a book. Now, they might not know what they want to write, but they just have this feeling that I've got all this experience, I've got all this knowledge, and if I die, it's just going to disappear and go to waste. I want to leave a record of this because I think most entrepreneurs have a desire to serve. And so a lot of it comes from that mentality of, I want to leave some sort of legacy or some sort of contribution. I want to leave some mark. And a book is a great way to do that. A lot of other entrepreneurs are coming in saying, hey, I just think this would be a great marketing tool for my business. If I write this book, it's going to establish me as the expert in my field, and it's going to be a business card on steroids, and I want it as a marketing tool. And a lot of entrepreneurs want both. They want the legacy and they want the practical marketing tool. And so we help entrepreneurs to go through that process because entrepreneurs are experts at their business, but they're not necessarily an expert at crafting a book and marketing a book and getting it out there. So we're helping them do what we're good at to showcase what they're good at.
Wow. So I like the theme of showcasing what they're good at. And I also like the idea of legacy. That's a big idea, I think, because, we tend to work at my firm with owner operators of businesses, anywhere from like $2 to $50 million in revenues. And they're all in the B2B space. And some of these folks are incredibly fascinating. I mean, they have great stories, especially you talk to somebody who's running a $20 million company and they tell you when they started it at the kitchen table. Those kind of things. And I'm not saying everybody deserves a biography. We're not all Winston Churchill or anything where we need that. But telling that story. So how does somebody go from, I think I have a story to tell, I think I have some ideas worth sharing, and then they think about a finished book? Tell us a little bit about that journey, how you help people through that.
Sure. Well, it starts out talking about the entrepreneur / author's objective. What do they want out of this? If it's to build a legacy, that's one thing. If it's to grow their business, that's another thing. And generally, we're focused more on the business growth side of things. And so when we start working with an author, we ask them questions like, well, what's your dream for this book? What results do you want to see from the book? Not in terms of book sales or this many people reading it, but when somebody picks up that book and reads that book, what do you want them to do after they read that book or while they're reading that book? And then that will generally turn to, well, I want them to call me up and buy my product or buy my service or request more information, sign up for my newsletter, something, but they want to get them into that marketing funnel so that they can become a customer or client someday. So then we say, okay, so then who is this audience? Who is your ideal audience? If you could choose 50 or 100 or 1,000 new customers off the shelf, and you could pick who that is, who's the ideal audience that you're going after. And as we ask those types of questions, then we start getting answers that help us to figure out what type of content would appeal to that person and generate the response that our client, the entrepreneur author, is looking for.
Wow. So there's, I mean, it's like classic marketing in the sense that you got to know who the audience is. Well, even more so. You're saying what does this book solve, or what does this book, what actions will be taken after somebody reads this book? So having a view or a clear picture on that, and then, well, who's the who? Like if I say I want them to call me, who do you want calling you? You're asking those basic questions in designing a book. So is this really is this something, clearly it lends itself to people who provide services or professional services. Is there a fit for somebody who's actually figured out, let's say, productivity in manufacturing, or they've done other things that maybe aren't classic white collar professional services, but have done other things? Are there interesting books in those categories?
There's every single category has an opportunity for a book to be written about it. It doesn't matter if you're making toys or skateboards or bikes or cars or whatever. Anybody can write a book about their business. There's always an angle there. There's always a story there. The book as a business card or as a marketing tool really does lend itself really well to consultants. And so, because when you're a consultant, people are paying you for your advice. And writing a book is a great way to show people, I've got this in my brain. And what happens, the funny thing is actually a lot of our clients who are consultants will come to us and say, I don't want to put everything into my book, because if I put it all in the book, why would somebody hire me? They can just go read the book for $20. They're not going to want to pay me $20,000 to come in and talk to them about it. And we explain, when somebody reads the book, they're going to say, wow, this is amazing material. We need to do this in our business, but I don't want to do it myself. We should go hire the author to do it. That's the actual result of the book. And so we see a lot of consultants come through saying, I want to write a book to showcase my expertise so that people will trust me and like me and understand what I do. And then they'll call me up and say, hey, we want to hire you to come in and implement this book in our business. I think one great case study, not a client of ours, but Gino Wickman, he wrote a book called Traction many years ago. And that's since been expanded into a series of books. And as a result of that, I don't know if Gino actually does any consulting, but he's got a company that has thousands of consultants working in it, and they're generating a lot of revenue off of those books because people have bought into the ideas behind those books. But as somebody who runs a business myself and loves those books, I've read the books and I've tried to self-implement those books, and it just doesn't quite work. And so then you go out and you say, I need somebody to implement this for me. And that's how Gino has built this business with thousands of consultants working for him. It starts with the books, getting people to know, like, and trust you. And then it turns into, well, we need help to get this implemented in our business.
Well, and I'm not saying that what I do, certainly on the consulting training, strategy side, is the same. But if you gave me a book on neurosurgery, it could tell me everything I have to do. It doesn't mean you should give me a scalpel. So, so just having the instructions, and I think a lot of people in business would read a book, and certainly my first book was published in probably around 2010, and that has absolutely proven to be the case, where people read the book, and the more they've read of it, the more thoroughly, the more dog-eared the book is, I've found in practice, the more eager they are to work with me, which is fascinating. So they're actually taking notes. I mean, I had one person give me summaries of the chapters, and they really wanted to work with me even more. So I'm completely on board with that as an idea. I definitely see how that works. So writing the book, getting the book published is one thing. Getting the book out there so people might read it, right, which you still, or at least buy it so they have it and they flip through it or whatever, is a whole nother thing. So what have you seen, Josh, as being like practical possible things? I mean, again, if somebody wants to throw six figures into a marketing budget, that's one thing. But what can real people do who might go through the steps of writing a book, perhaps with you, the marketing? What are some of the practical things they can do there?
Yeah, like you said, if you have money, you can always throw money at things. We have a partner who guarantees that they can get your book into the Wall Street Journal best-selling list and USA Today bestseller list, but it costs 50 grand a pop, and that's not attainable for most entrepreneurs, right? So when it comes to doing your own PR or getting the message out there about your book, the first question is, where does your audience hang out? We already talked about that ideal audience that you're looking for. Well, where do they hang out? Where do they consume content? Are they reading books? Are they reading magazines? Which magazines? Do they listen to podcasts? Do they go to events? Wherever they're hanging out, that's where your book needs to be, is in that channel. Now, before I ran this book, Business Published Author, I started a marketing agency called MWI. And in 2013, I got the opportunity to start writing for Forbes magazine as one of their contributors. And that led to opportunities to write for about 24 other business publications. I've had my writing published in Fortune and Time and Business Insider, Mashable, TechCrunch, all these different places. And that opportunity was amazing. And it led to a lot of lead flow for my company. And later, when I published my first book, it led to a lot of exposure for my book because of those connections. So getting into those publications can be great. And you can do that for free because there are all these people out there who are writing articles for these publications, print and online, and you can pitch these people. And the secret here to pitching them is not to just send an email, because these people get thousands of emails, sometimes in just a single month, pitching them on ideas. They don't really need new ideas that way because they get so many of them, they can't even look at them. However, if you mail a copy of a physical book to one of these writers, they'll open that package. And if you put a little note in there saying, hey, I've been reading your work on Forbes or wherever, and I really like what you're writing, I wanted to give you a copy of my book. No obligation. You're not saying you have to write an article about me. You're just saying, hey, I wanted to give you a copy of my book. I thought you might be interested. That is at least going to get read and get their attention. And then there's a chance that they might cover that book in an article. Now, if you can connect that book with something specific that they need because they cover certain topics. So for example, my first book was about chief marketing officers. And there are writers out there who focus on marketing and the role of the chief marketing officer. So for me, it was easy for me to identify those writers, send my book to them and say, hey, I see you write a lot about CMOs. I just wrote this book all about CMOs. I thought you might be interested in it. And that led to PR. And I got written up in different business publications with that simple tactic. And all it cost me was the postage fee and the price of the book.
Wow. So you end up with you create kind of a groundswell of awareness in people who have their own circles of influence, right? So so if you get covered in Forbes and somebody mentions your book, even in a mention could be, I know when I read articles and they mention a book and it sounds interesting, I immediately go to Amazon and I might actually divert from the article I was reading for a full minute to read the description on Amazon. And 9 out of 10 times I'll say, I might as well order it and get it. I'm not a big Kindle person just because maybe generationally I like to see ink on paper. It still matters to me. And it's also a good reminder that I have to get to that book when it's on the stack of books I have to get to. But I could see that process. So what else can somebody do to say, okay, I want to get this book out there? I mean, maybe a better question is, what's a realistic expectation? I mean, should I expect if I write a good business book, and let's stipulate for now that it's good. It's good and it's of the day. It's current. Should I be looking at moving 500 copies, 5,000 copies? I mean, what should my head be thinking about?
So the average self-published book sells a few hundred copies during its entire lifetime. I mean, we're talking 200-300 copies, and half of those are your mom buying it, right? So self-publishing, it's hard to sell a lot of books. Now, the average published book, traditionally published book, doesn't do all that much better. Maybe it's selling 2,000 or 3,000 copies during its lifetime. So a lot of people go into publishing a book with unrealistic expectations across the board because they're thinking, oh, I'm going to sell 50,000 copies, 100,000, a million copies or something. Well, selling a million copies of your book is like being the Michael Jordan of the NBA. Some people do that, but it's really, really rare, and it's probably not going to happen. And the thing is, it doesn't need to happen for it to change your life. There are people who have only sold 200 copies of their book, and that book has changed their life. How? Is because it got into the right hands of their ideal audience, who then hired them. So a friend of mine, Sarah Weiss, she is a consultant. She runs a business. They do digital consulting stuff. And she wrote a book in 2 weeks. She actually wrote it in 1 week, edited it the second week, and then self-published it on Amazon. I don't know that her book has really sold that many copies. And I don't know that her book is really a perfect book. Chances are it's not, because she wrote it so quickly and edited it so quickly. However, in the 12 months after she published that book, she signed multiple six-figure agreements with clients because of that book, because Facebook or Microsoft, somebody there picked up that book and then said, you know what, we need to bring her in to talk to us about this. And then they ended up signing a contract. So what she told me was, hey, my book's not perfect, and it's not through a traditional publisher, and there are all sorts of mistakes in it, but look what it did for me in terms of landing these contracts. So if you want a really effective way to get your book out there, just mail it to your ideal audience. Give it away for free. You don't have to even worry about PR. It's great to get in the publications. It's great to get on podcasts. But what you're really trying to do is getting your book in the hands of the audience that's going to buy your products and services. And for a lot of authors, the best way to do that is just to give that book to those people.
Because at the end of the day, that's really the end game, right? You want to get the right people reading your ideas. It's not about making the, $8 in royalties you might pick up on the sale of that book. And not every, certainly in the business category, not every book's going to be a Harry Potter or anything, where it becomes its own business model selling books. But leverage that way that you described, I think makes a whole lot of sense. Could you just comment a little bit, because you use the term, and for our listeners, self-publish, right? So there's things, Amazon, what was CreateSpace, Lightning Source, those things are available. And then you have traditional publishing, right? The imprints that we all know at Barnes and Nobles. Should somebody writing a book as a business person and so on, should we be striving to get Wiley to carry our book? Is that an important goal, I guess, is my question.
For 99% of authors out there, and it doesn't matter whether it's fiction, nonfiction, entrepreneur, no matter who you are, for 99% of authors, traditional publishing, going with a HarperCollins or McGraw-Hill, is not the right fit. And you might think it's the best fit because, it seems more credible and they're going to do all sorts of stuff for me. The truth is, they don't really do anything for you. They print the book, and that's can be helpful. They'll help you design the book cover. They'll help get it edited. But you can do all these things on your own. You can go on Fiverr, you can go on Upwork, you can hire a cover designer from 99 Designs for $500 and get a pretty decent book cover. So you can get the cover designed. You can get it edited by somebody. You can get somebody to narrate the audio version of it. You don't need a publisher to do these things for you. What publishers can do that the average person can't do is typically distribution, getting it into international markets. That gets a little bit tough to do. But for most authors, they don't need that anyway. And the publishers aren't going to be super helpful with the marketing, especially, which is what authors really need. Typically, even if you sign up with a traditional publisher, they're going to print your book and then say, great, all right, now you go out and sell it. And you as the author might be sitting there saying, wait, isn't that what you do as the publisher? No, not unless you're Barack Obama or something, then they'll market it. But if you're just a normal entrepreneur off the street, they're not going to put any marketing budget behind that, or maybe they'll send out a press release or two or something, but really it's on your shoulders to market that book. Well, that being the case, why not self-publish it? It's so easy to do through Amazon or Ingram Spark. You can do this your own with the help of a few contractors, and then you have total control over that book. And a big part of it is you can do it a lot faster. If you self-publish, like my friend Sarah, she self-published in 2 weeks.
2 weeks, wow.
Now that's super fast. A more realistic timeline is 6 to 12 months for somebody to self-publish. But if you go through a traditional publisher, you're looking at 12 to 18 months for you to get that book out there after you finish your manuscript and give it to the publisher. So you might be looking at a 2.5, 3-year timeline to get your book out there. And for a lot of entrepreneurs, that's just too long to wait. They can't wait that long to get the results.
And the other thing you just hit on, which I think is not a small point, is unless you're a name like that, you're a big get where you got the $1 million advance, and you know if you're that person, right? You don't have to be. There's no surprises there. They really, it's not like the movies. Anytime you see a movie about a an author and their publisher, and they're putting together the PR tour, and they're paying for it and putting you up in nice hotels and stuff. That's not what's going on. It's going to be like, how big is your list? Okay, go at it. And plus, the other thing is they get to keep, or they have to, they actually, the royalties you get from the books is much smaller than you might if you self-publish as well, as I understand it.
Yeah, I mean, you're making pennies off these books. You will never recoup your investment off of book sales. I shouldn't say never. I mean, there's an outside chance, but for the vast majority out there, you're going to spend more money creating your book than you are going to get back from the book sales. Where you're going to make the money is in the consulting gigs, the paid speaking engagements, and selling more of your product or service. That's where you're going to make the money. The book is an investment. It's not a moneymaker in and of itself, except in rare situations.
Right. So it's an investment in growing your platform, growing people's awareness of you, what you do. And very lastly, then, so let's say I'm not a consultant, but I actually make something. I make a product, right? I make a machine or an industrial product or something. But I know a lot about what that process is all about. Can that help get me? I guess I'd be looking for leads, appointments. Can that work in much the same way, even though it isn't necessarily a professional service that I'm offering?
Yeah. I mean, as long as you're selling something and there's some aspect of marketing and communication to get people to buy what you have, a book's going to be able to help with that. Now, is a book the right fit for every single entrepreneur out there? I don't think so.
Hmm.
In most cases, I think there is a fit, but in some cases, there have been entrepreneurs who have come to me and say, hey, I want to write a book. I want to grow my business. And I look at their business and I say, well, how do you get clients? And how do they find you? And why do they choose you? And I look at it and I say, you know what? I don't think it's makes sense in your situation to write a book, at least not as a marketing tool. Now, it might make all the sense in the world from a legacy standpoint, but that's a different case. So it's not a fit for every single entrepreneur, but I would say 80, 90% of the entrepreneurs out there, it can be a fantastic marketing tool. I mean, there's nothing like it. If you send out a piece of direct mail, that's like one page of a book and everybody throws it in the trash. But with a book, it's like having a direct mailer that's 200 pages long. And not only do you not have to send it to people, people buy it from you, read the whole thing, and love it and feel like they had the privilege of reading that marketing material that you sent to them. There's nothing else out there like that.
Wow, that's exact. I mean, the other thing too, there's still a psychology of people are loath to throw away a book. Maybe it's the way, just mom told us you can't do that. It's a valuable thing. So, and a piece of marketing collateral might have actually cost more to print because it's glossy, it's inlay, foil treatment. But people think nothing of tossing out these real expensive, brochures and pamphlets. But a book they'll keep on their desk, which is fantastic. So, Josh, thank you so much for sharing with our listeners a little bit of the journey of getting to a book. And if somebody listening wanted to know more about you, what you do, where should they go and how should they find out more?
Place to go is publishedauthor.com. And we also have a podcast there. I interview best-selling authors, literary agents, publishers, editors, all sorts of different people in the publishing industry. And it's all focused on helping entrepreneurs learn what they need to know to write and publish their book, just like we've been talking about here. So if you head on over to publishedauthor.com, you can find out about the podcast, which of course is free. And then we have a bunch of programs too, where we help entrepreneurs to become authors there.
Fantastic, Josh. Thank you again for sharing with our audience at the Revenue Throughput Podcast.
Thanks so much, Jose.